Right now, at this exact moment, something is happening that most people will never even notice. While you're watching this, there's a frequency, an invisible signal, moving through your reality, searching, scanning, selecting. And here's the truth that might shake you: it didn't reach everyone, it reached you. Not by accident, not by coincidence, but because something inside you, your energy, your awareness, your readiness, matched it. This is what many have called Sophia's emerald signal, a rare alignment where consciousness, intention, and quantum energy collapse into a single point of manifestation. And here's why this matters more than anything you've heard before. Because this isn't just another message about manifestation. This is about a closing window, a final alignment, a last chance to shift from chasing your desires to becoming the version of yourself that your desires chase. Most people spend their lives trying harder, forcing outcomes, repeating affirmations without understanding the deeper mechanics. But what if I told you that effort is not the key, frequency is? What if the life you want is already existing, and the only thing separating you from it is the signal you're emitting right now? Stay with me, because what you're about to understand isn't surface level motivation. It's a complete rewiring of how reality responds to you. And if you truly grasp this, your entire trajectory can change, starting today. In your Mint CTA subscribe, like, the comment task. Before we go deeper, take a second right now, subscribe to the channel, like this video and comment below. I receive the emerald signal. And I want you to add one more thing. Tell me which part of the United States you're watching from. Whether it's California, Texas, New York, Florida, I want to see where this signal is reaching. Because when you comment, you're not just engaging. You're anchoring your intention into reality. CFTR 1. Into 3,000 words, plain paragraph. There is a fundamental truth that most people never learn, not because it is hidden, but because it is misunderstood. And that truth is this: reality does not respond to what you want, it responds to what you are. This single idea, when fully understood, dismantles years of confusion around manifestation, effort and desire, because it shifts the focus away from external chasing and places it entirely on internal alignment. When we talk about something like Sophia's emerald signal, we are not referring to a mystical concept disconnected from science, but rather a symbolic representation of a very real phenomenon: the interaction between consciousness and the quantum field. In quantum physics, it has been observed that particles exist in a state of probability until they are observed, and this observation collapses those probabilities into a single outcome. Now, most people hear this and assume it means thinking creates reality, but that is an oversimplification. The deeper truth is that your entire being, your thoughts, your emotions, your beliefs, your identity, acts as the observer, and what you consistently embody determines which version of reality collapses into your experience. This is where most people fail, because they attempt to change their outcomes without changing their internal state, and as a result, they remain stuck in cycles of effort without transformation. The emerald signal represents a moment where your awareness begins to shift from passive observation to conscious participation, where you no longer see yourself as separate from reality, but as a co-creator within it. This shift is not just philosophical, it is practical, because once you understand that your internal state is constantly broadcasting a frequency, you begin to realize that everything you experience is, in some way, a reflection of that broadcast. Think of it like a radio station. If you are tuned to a frequency of lack, doubt, and uncertainty, then the reality you experience will reflect those qualities, no matter how much you consciously desire something different. On the other hand, if you begin to tune yourself to a frequency of certainty, abundance, and alignment, then your external reality will begin to shift in ways that may seem almost effortless. This is not magic, it is coherence. And coherence is one of the most powerful principles in both physics and human psychology. When your thoughts, emotions, and actions are aligned, you create a coherent signal that interacts with the quantum field in a much more effective way. But here is where it becomes even more interesting. Most people are not operating in coherence, they are operating in contradiction. They say they want success, but they feel unworthy. They say they want abundance, but they focus on scarcity. They say they want change, but they cling to familiar patterns. This internal conflict creates noise in their signal, and that noise prevents them from aligning with the realities they desire. The emerald signal, in this context, is not something external that you are waiting to receive. It is something internal that you are learning to generate. It is the moment when your internal contradictions begin to dissolve, and your energy becomes clear, focused, and aligned. Now you might be wondering, why is this being called a last chance? And the answer is not about fear but about awareness. At certain points in life, there are moments of heightened clarity, moments where you are more open to change, more receptive to new ideas, more willing to step into a different version of yourself. These moments do not last forever. They come and go, and if you ignore them, you often fall back into old patterns. What you are experiencing right now, by watching this, is one of those moments. Your awareness is expanding, your perspective is shifting, and you have an opportunity to make a different choice. But that choice requires understanding, not just inspiration. It requires you to see beyond surface, level advice, and begin to work with the deeper mechanics of your own consciousness. One of the most important concepts to understand here is the idea of identity. Your identity is not just who you think you are, it is the sum of your beliefs, your habits, your emotional patterns, and your expectations about reality. And your identity acts as a filter, determining what you perceive, what you attract, and what you allow into your life. If your identity is rooted in limitation, then no matter how much you try to manifest something greater, you will unconsciously resist it. This is why so many people experience temporary success followed by regression, because their external results changed, but their internal identity did not. To truly align with the emerald signal, you must begin to shift your identity at a fundamental level. This does not mean pretending to be someone else. It means becoming aware of the patterns that define your current identity and consciously choosing to evolve them. For example, instead of seeing yourself as someone who is trying to succeed, you begin to see yourself as someone who naturally operates in success. Instead of seeing yourself as someone who is chasing opportunities, you begin to see yourself as someone who attracts them. This shift may seem subtle, but it has profound implications, because your identity shapes your behavior shapes your results, and your results reinforce your identity. By consciously changing your identity, you interrupt this cycle and create a new feedback loop that supports your desired reality. Another key aspect of this process is emotional regulation. Your emotions are not just reactions to your environment, they are signals that influence your internal state and your external experience. When you are consistently operating in emotions like fear, stress, or frustration, you are reinforcing a state of incoherence, and this affects how you perceive opportunities and how you respond to challenges. On the other hand, when you cultivate emotions like gratitude, confidence, and calm certainty, you create a state of coherence that enhances your ability to align with your goals. This is why practices like mindfulness, visualization, and intentional focus are so powerful, not because they are mystical rituals, but because they help you regulate your internal state and maintain alignment with your desired frequency. The emerald signal can be understood as a state of heightened coherence, where your thoughts, emotions, and actions are aligned with a clear intention, and this alignment allows you to interact with reality in a more effective way. But alignment alone is not enough, it must be sustained. Consistency is what transforms temporary states into lasting change. This is where discipline comes into play, not as a form of restriction, but as a tool for maintaining alignment over time. When you consistently choose thoughts, emotions, and actions that support your desired reality, you begin to rewire your neural pathways, and this rewiring makes it easier to maintain that state in the future. Over time, what once required effort becomes natural, and what once seemed impossible becomes inevitable. This is the process of embodiment, and embodiment is the ultimate goal of manifestation. It is not about getting something, it is about becoming someone. As you continue to move through this process, you will begin to notice subtle shifts in your experience. Opportunities may appear more frequently, interactions may feel more aligned, and challenges may become easier to navigate. These changes are not random, they are reflections of your internal transformation. However, it is important to remain grounded and avoid the trap of expecting instant results. Transformation is a process, and while shifts can happen quickly, lasting change requires time and consistency. The emerald signal is not a shortcut. It is a framework for understanding how your internal state influences your external reality, and how you can consciously align yourself with the outcomes you desire. As you integrate these ideas, you may begin to see your life from a different perspective. Instead of feeling like you are at the mercy of circumstances, you begin to recognize your role as a participant in the creation of your experience. This does not mean that you have complete control over everything, but it does mean that you have influence, and that influence is more significant than most people realize. By focusing on what you can control, your thoughts, your emotions, your actions, you begin to shift the probabilities in your favor, and over time, those shifts accumulate into meaningful change. The key is to remain aware, to stay aligned, and to continue evolving. Because the signal you are receiving right now is not just information, it is an invitation. An invitation to step into a different version of yourself, to operate from a higher level of awareness, and to engage with reality in a more intentional way. And the question is not whether this is possible. The question is whether you are willing to embrace it. At this stage, something begins to shift inside you, and it is subtle at first, almost unnoticeable, like the quiet turning of a key in a lock you didn't even realize was there. Because once you start understanding that reality responds to what you are rather than what you want, a deeper question naturally arises. How do you actually become the version of yourself that your desires are drawn to? instead of the one that keeps reaching for them? And the answer to this question is where most people either transform their lives or fall back into old cycles, because this is where theory must turn into embodiment, and knowledge must become practice. You see, the idea that desires can chase you instead of you chasing them is not just a motivational statement. It is rooted in a powerful principle that exists both in human psychology and in the structure of the universe itself, and that principle is attraction through congruence. Everything in existence is constantly organizing itself into patterns of resonance, where similar frequencies naturally come together, not because they are forced to, but because they match. This is true in physics, where waves synchronize. It is true in biology, where systems regulate themselves, and it is true in your life, where the opportunities, people, and outcomes you experience are influenced by the patterns you consistently embody. The reason most people feel like they are chasing their desires is because they are trying to attract something that does not match their current state of being. And so they rely on effort, persistence, and sometimes even struggle to try to bridge that gap. But when you begin to align your identity, your emotional state, and your actions with the reality you want, that gap starts to close, and what once required force begins to feel natural. This is the transition from effort to alignment, and it is one of the most important shifts you will ever make. To understand this more clearly, you have to look at how desire actually works. Desire is often misunderstood as something external, something you don't have that you want to bring into your life. But in truth, desire is a signal from your future self, a reflection of a reality that already exists in the field of possibilities. And when you feel a strong desire for something, it is not random. It is an indication that there is a version of you that already has that experience. The problem is not the desire itself. The problem is the distance between your current identity and the identity that aligns with that desire. And so, instead of trying to get the desire, your focus must shift to becoming the version of yourself that naturally experiences it. This is where the concept of the emerald signal deepens. Because now it is not just about receiving or recognizing the signal. It is about stabilizing it within yourself, turning it into a constant state, rather than a temporary moment of clarity. And stability comes from repetition, from consistency, from the daily choices you make that either reinforce your current identity or support your transformation into something greater. One of the most effective ways to begin this process is through conscious awareness of your patterns. Most people operate on autopilot, repeating the same thoughts, emotions, and behaviors without realizing it, and these patterns create predictable outcomes. If you want different results, you have to interrupt these patterns, and that starts with awareness. When you notice yourself thinking in a way that contradicts your desired reality, you don't judge it, you simply recognize it, and choose a different thought. When you notice yourself reacting emotionally in a way that reinforces limitation, you pause and shift your focus. These small moments of awareness may seem insignificant, but they are the foundation of transformation, because every time you choose alignment over habit, you strengthen the new identity you are building. Another critical element of this process is your relationship with time. One of the biggest reasons people feel like they are chasing their desires is because they are constantly focused on when something will happen. And this creates a sense of urgency that often leads to frustration. But when you understand that your role is to align with the identity that matches your desire, rather than control the timing of its manifestation, your relationship with time begins to change. You become more present, more focused on the process, and less attached to immediate outcomes. This does not mean you stop taking action. It means your actions become more intentional, more aligned, and less driven by fear or lack. And when your actions come from a place of alignment rather than desperation, they are far more effective. This is where many people misunderstand manifestation, because they think it is about sitting back and waiting for things to happen, when in reality, it is about taking aligned action that reflects your desired identity. If you see yourself as someone who is confident, you act with confidence. If you see yourself as someone who is successful, you make decisions from that perspective. If you see yourself as someone who attracts opportunities, you remain open and responsive to them. These actions may seem small, but they create momentum, and momentum is what turns potential into reality. As you continue to align your thoughts, emotions, and actions, you begin to create a state of internal certainty, and certainty is one of the most powerful forces in manifestation. When you are certain about who you are and where you are going, you eliminate doubt, and without doubt, there is no resistance. This does not mean you will never experience challenges, but it means you will approach them from a place of stability rather than fear, and this stability allows you to navigate your path with greater clarity and confidence. Another important aspect to understand is the role of belief systems. Your beliefs are like the operating system of your mind, shaping how you interpret your experiences and what you consider possible. If you hold beliefs that contradict your desired reality, they will create resistance. even if you are consciously trying to align yourself. For example, if you believe that success is difficult or that opportunities are limited, these beliefs will influence your behavior in ways that reinforce those ideas. To truly step into the version of yourself that your desires are drawn to, you must examine and update your beliefs. This does not happen overnight, but it begins with questioning the assumptions you have accepted as truth. Where did these beliefs come from? Are they based on your direct experience, or are they inherited from others? And most importantly, do they support the reality you want to create? By asking these questions, you begin to loosen the grip of limiting beliefs and create space for new ones that align with your goals. As your beliefs shift, your perception changes, and when your perception changes, your experience follows. This is why two people can be in the same situation and have completely different outcomes, because they are interpreting and responding to that situation through different belief systems. The emerald signal, in this sense, is not just about frequency, it is about clarity, clarity of thought, clarity of intention, and clarity of identity. When you are clear about who you are becoming, your decisions become easier, your actions become more focused, and your energy becomes more directed. And this clarity is what allows your desires to begin moving toward you, because you are no longer sending mixed signals. You are no longer saying one thing while feeling another, or wanting one outcome while expecting another. Instead, you are aligned, and alignment creates attraction. As this process continues, you may begin to notice something interesting happening. Things that once felt out of reach begin to appear within your reality, sometimes in ways you did not expect. Opportunities may come through unexpected channels, connections may form naturally, and situations may unfold in your favor. These moments are often described as coincidences or luck, but in reality, they are the result of alignment. When your internal state matches a particular outcome, you become more likely to recognize and act on opportunities that support that outcome. This is not about controlling every detail of your life. It is about positioning yourself in a way that allows favorable outcomes to emerge more easily. However, it is important to remain grounded and avoid the trap of overinterpretation. Not every event is a sign, and not every challenge is a failure. The key is to maintain your alignment regardless of external circumstances, because consistency is what sustains transformation. There will be moments where your old patterns try to reassert themselves, where doubt creeps in, or where progress feels slow. These moments are part of the process, not evidence that it is not working. In fact, they are often indicators that you are moving beyond your comfort zone and into new territory. The difference now is that you have the awareness to recognize these patterns and the ability to choose a different response. Instead of reacting automatically, you respond intentionally, and this intentional response reinforces your new identity. Over time, these choices accumulate, and what once required conscious effort becomes your natural way of being. This is when the shift truly happens. When you no longer feel like you are trying to manifest something, because your life itself becomes a reflection of your alignment. And in this state, your desires are no longer distant goals. They are extensions of who you are. They are not something you chase, they are something you embody, and as a result, they begin to move toward you with a sense of ease and inevitability. This is the deeper meaning behind the idea that your desires chase you. It is not about passivity, it is about congruence. It is about becoming so aligned with your desired reality that it becomes the natural outcome of your state of being. And when you reach this point, you realize that the journey was never about acquiring something external. It was about transforming yourself. The emerald signal is simply the catalyst, the moment of awareness that sets this process in motion. What you do with that awareness is what determines your path. And now, as you continue forward, the question becomes not whether your desires can find you, but whether you are willing to fully step into the version of yourself that they are already looking for. Now you arrive at the point where everything either integrates or dissolves, because understanding the signal and aligning with it is only part of the journey. But the final transformation happens when you no longer see the signal as something separate from you, when you no longer feel like you are tuning into something external, but instead realize that you are the source of the signal itself. And this realization is where true power begins, because as long as you believe that something outside of you is responsible for your transformation, you will always remain in a state of seeking. But the moment you recognize that the frequency you've been searching for is something you generate, sustain, and embody, everything changes at a fundamental level. And this is what we call the final alignment, the moment where identity, awareness, and action merge into a single, coherent state of being. At this level, manifestation is no longer a practice you perform. It becomes a natural extension of who you are, just like breathing or thinking. It is no longer something you try to do. It is something that happens as a result of your existence. And this is why so few people truly reach this stage, because it requires letting go of the old paradigm completely, the paradigm of effort, of control, of constant seeking, and stepping into a new paradigm where trust, clarity, and embodiment take its place. But this does not mean that life suddenly becomes perfect, or that challenges disappear. What changes is your relationship with those challenges. Because instead of seeing them as obstacles, you begin to see them as feedback, as reflections of your current state, and as opportunities to refine your alignment even further. This shift in perception is one of the most powerful aspects of the final alignment, because it removes the emotional resistance that often blocks growth, and replaces it with curiosity and awareness. When something does not go as planned, instead of reacting with frustration or doubt, you ask yourself a different question. Not, why is this happening to me? But what is this showing me about my current state? And this question opens the door to deeper understanding, because every experience you have is, in some way, a mirror of your internal world. This is not about blaming yourself for every negative outcome. It is about recognizing your influence and using that awareness to make conscious adjustments. As you continue to operate from this level of awareness, you begin to notice that your reactions become more intentional, your decisions become more aligned, and your overall experience becomes more stable. This stability is not dependent on external circumstances. It comes from within, from the consistency of your internal state. And this is what allows you to remain aligned even in the face of uncertainty. One of the key elements of sustaining this alignment is trust, not blind belief, but a deep, grounded trust in the process, in yourself, and in the unfolding of your path. Trust is what allows you to release the need for constant validation, to let go of the urgency that often accompanies desire, and to move forward with confidence even when you cannot see the full picture. This is particularly important, because the mind naturally seeks certainty. It wants to know how things will happen, and when they will happen. But the nature of reality is not always predictable, and trying to control every detail often leads to resistance. When you trust the process, you create space for possibilities that go beyond your current understanding, and this is where some of the most meaningful experiences emerge. However, trust alone is not enough. It must be supported by clarity and action. Clarity ensures that you are moving in a direction that aligns with your values and your vision, while action ensures that you are actively participating in the creation of your experience. This combination of trust, clarity, and action forms the foundation of the final alignment, and when these elements are in place, your ability to navigate your path becomes significantly enhanced. Another important aspect of this stage is integration, the process of bringing your awareness into every area of your life, not just the moments when you are focused on manifestation or personal growth, but in your daily interactions, your work, your relationships, and your routines. True alignment is not something you turn on and off. It is something you live, something you express through your choices and your behavior. This means that the way you think, the way you speak, and the way you act all become reflections of your aligned state. When there is consistency across these areas, your signal becomes stronger, clearer, and more stable, and this stability is what allows your desired reality to take shape more effectively. At this point, you may begin to realize that the concept of a last chance was never about pressure or fear, but about awareness, about recognizing that there are moments in life where you are more open to transformation, more receptive to change, and more capable of stepping into a new version of yourself. These moments are opportunities, and while they may feel urgent, their true purpose is to bring your attention to the present, to encourage you to make conscious choices, rather than defaulting to old patterns. The fact that you have stayed with this message, that you have engaged with these ideas, suggests that you are in one of those moments right now, and what you choose to do next matters. It is easy to feel inspired in the moment, to resonate with the concepts and imagine a different future. But the real transformation happens in the days and weeks that follow, in the choices you make when no one is watching, in the habits you reinforce, and in the way you respond to your experiences. This is where discipline becomes essential, not as a form of restriction, but as a commitment to your growth, as a way of ensuring that your actions remain aligned with your intentions. Discipline is what bridges the gap between awareness and embodiment, and without it, even the most powerful insights can fade over time. As you continue to apply what you have learned, you will likely encounter moments of doubt, moments where your old patterns resurface, or where progress feels slower than you expected. These moments are natural, and they do not mean that you are failing. They are part of the process of transformation, and how you respond to them will determine your trajectory. Instead of seeing them as setbacks, you can choose to see them as opportunities to strengthen your alignment, to reaffirm your identity, and to continue moving forward. This perspective allows you to maintain momentum, even when the path is not perfectly smooth. Over time, as you consistently operate from this aligned state, you will begin to experience a deeper sense of fulfillment. Not because everything in your life is perfect, but because you are no longer dependent on external conditions for your sense of well-being. This internal fulfillment creates a sense of freedom, a freedom that allows you to engage with life more fully, to pursue your goals with confidence, and to appreciate the journey as much as the destination. And in this state, manifestation becomes less about achieving specific outcomes, and more about expressing your potential, about exploring what is possible, and about continuously evolving. The emerald signal, which once seemed like something you were trying to understand or connect with, now becomes a part of you, a natural expression of your awareness and your alignment. You no longer need to seek it, because you are living it. And this is the final realization, the understanding that the power you were looking for was never outside of you. It was always within you, waiting to be recognized, developed, and expressed. As you move forward from this point, you carry this awareness with you, not as a concept, but as a lived experience, as a way of being that influences every aspect of your life. And while the journey does not end here, it evolves, it expands, and it continues to unfold in ways that you may not yet fully understand. But now you are equipped with the knowledge, the awareness, and the tools to navigate that journey with intention and clarity. And perhaps the most important thing to remember is this: your desires were never meant to be chased. They were meant to be aligned with, embodied, and experienced. The signal was never something you had to wait for. It was something you had to become. And now that you understand this, the question is no longer whether the signal is live. The question is whether you are ready to live as the signal itself.